Keisha Williams had always been the girl who walked into a room with her head held high. At 15, she carried herself with the kind of confidence that made teachers remember her name and made friends gravitate toward her lunch table. Her laugh was infectious, the kind that made everyone around her want to join in even if they didn't know what was funny. But now, standing in front of Lincoln High School on a crisp Monday morning in September, that confidence felt like it was slipping through her fingers like sand. The moving truck had pulled away from their old house in Atlanta just 3 days ago, and here she was, about to walk into a completely new world. The school looked different from what she was used to. Everything seemed newer, shinier, more expensive. The parking lot was filled with cars that probably cost more than her dad made in a year. Students were walking in small groups, their backpacks looking like they came straight from some fancy store at the mall. Keisha adjusted the straps of her own backpack, a sturdy black one that had gotten her through 3 years of middle school and her freshman year. It wasn't fancy, but it was reliable. Kind of like her, she thought with a small smile. Her mom had dropped her off early, wanting to make sure she had plenty of time to find her classes. "You've got this, baby," her mom had said, squeezing her hand before driving off to her new job at the hospital. "Just be yourself, that's always been enough." As Keisha walked through the front doors, she couldn't help but notice how different everything felt. Back at her old school in Atlanta, the hallways buzzed with a familiar energy. She knew which water fountain had the coldest water, which bathroom was always clean, and exactly how long it took to get from her locker to chemistry class. Here, everything was a mystery waiting to be solved. The first thing that hit her was how quiet it seemed despite being full of students. Back home, the hallways were never quiet. There was always someone calling out to a friend, music playing from someone's phone, or the sound of sneakers squeaking on the linoleum floor. This place felt more controlled, more reserved. She found her locker on the second try, spinning the combination her mom had written down for her on a sticky note. The metal door opened with a satisfying click, and she hung up the small mirror her best friend Destiny had given her as a going-away present. "So you never forget how beautiful you are," Destiny had said, hugging her tight at the airport. Looking at that mirror now, Keisha saw the same girl she'd always been. Dark skin that glowed even under the harsh fluorescent lights. Natural hair that she'd learned to love and style in a dozen different ways, and eyes that held just a hint of nervousness behind their usual spark. Her first class was English with Mrs. Patterson, and Keisha was relieved to find that the teacher was warm and welcoming. She introduced Keisha to the class, and a few students even smiled and waved. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. But as the day went on, she started to notice things. Little things that individually might not mean much, but together painted a picture she was beginning to understand. In the hallway between classes, she caught a group of girls staring at her. Not the curious, friendly kind of staring that happened when someone new showed up. This was different. Their eyes seemed to take in every detail of her appearance, from her jeans to her sneakers, to the way she wore her hair in a high puff. At lunch, she looked for a place to sit and noticed something that made her stomach twist a little. The cafeteria was divided in a way that seemed almost intentional. Most of the black students sat together in one section, while the white students claimed most of the other tables. It wasn't a rule written anywhere, but it was clear as day to anyone paying attention. Keisha had never really thought about being one of only a few. Back in Atlanta, her school was diverse in every way that mattered. Nobody was the only anything. Here, she was starting to realize things might be different. She chose a table near the middle, not wanting to feel like she had to pick a side on her first day. A few students nodded at her politely, but nobody invited her to join their conversation. She ate her sandwich quietly, listening to the chatter around her and trying to pick up on the social rhythms of this new place. In biology class, her teacher assigned lab partners, and she was paired with a boy named Tyler who seemed nice enough. He helped her catch up on what the class had been working on and even shared his notes from the previous week. But she noticed how some of the other students looked at them working together, and she filed that observation away for later. The final bell rang, and Keisha made her way to her locker to grab her things. She was tired in a way that had nothing to do with the actual schoolwork. Starting over was exhausting, even when people were being nice. As she walked to the front of the school, to wait for her mom, she overheard a conversation that made her steps slow down. "Did you see the new girl?" one voice said. "Yeah, she seems okay," another replied. "I guess she's just bigger than most of the girls here." "And did you see what she was wearing? That outfit probably came from the discount store." Keisha felt. Her cheeks burned, but she kept walking. She'd heard comments about her body before. She wasn't the smallest girl in her grade, and she'd learned to live with that fact. Her mom had always taught her that bodies came in all shapes and sizes, and that what mattered was being healthy and happy. But something about hearing it here, in this place where she was already the outsider, stung differently. Her mom pulled up right on time, and Keisha slid into the passenger seat with a sigh. "How was it?" her mom asked, studying her daughter's face. "Fine," Keisha said automatically, then caught herself. Her mom had always been able to read her like an open book. "Actually, it was okay. Different, but okay. I think it's going to take some time to figure things out." Her mom reached over and squeezed her hand. "Change is hard, baby. But you're stronger than you know. Give it time." As they drove home through neighborhoods that still felt foreign, Keisha looked out the window and made herself a promise. She would give it time, just like her mom said. She would be patient with herself and with this new place. But she wouldn't change who she was to fit in. She had no idea that in just a few weeks that promise would be put to the test in ways she never could have imagined. 3 weeks had passed since Keisha's first day at Lincoln High, and she was starting to find her rhythm. She'd figured out the best routes between classes, made friends with the librarian who let her eat lunch in the media center when the cafeteria felt too overwhelming, and even joined the school newspaper. Writing had always been her escape, and Mrs. Chen, the journalism teacher, had welcomed her with open arms. But if Keisha was being honest with herself, she was also starting to notice things that made her uncomfortable. Little comments that seemed innocent on the surface but carried weight underneath. Looks that lasted just a bit too long. The way conversations sometimes stopped when she walked by. It started small. Really small. In gym class, when they were picking teams for volleyball, she was always one of the last chosen. Coach Rodriguez would assign teams to speed things up, but Keisha had noticed the pattern. It wasn't that she was bad at sports. Back in Atlanta, she'd been on the track team and could outrun half the boys in her grade. Maybe she's not athletic. She heard Ashley whisper to her friend during warm-ups one day. "She doesn't really look like she runs much." Keisha had pretended not to hear, but the words stuck with her. She started wearing loose-fitting clothes to gym class, trying to make herself smaller, less noticeable. Then there was lunch. She'd tried sitting with different groups, but somehow always ended up feeling like an outsider looking in. The conversations would shift when she joined, becoming more polite and less genuine. She found herself missing the easy friendships she'd left behind, where she could be silly or serious or anything in between without feeling like she was being judged. The real problems started when she decided to try out for the school's dance team. Keisha had been dancing since she was 6 years old. Her mom used to joke that she came out of the womb moving to a beat. Hip-hop, contemporary, even some ballet. She loved it all and was good at it too. The tryouts were held after school in the gymnasium. About 20 girls showed up, and Keisha felt a familiar thrill as she laced up her sneakers. This was her element. This was where she could show who she really was. The routine they had to learn was challenging but fun, with sharp movements and a driving beat that made Keisha's heart race in the best way. She picked it up quickly, her body moving with the confidence that came from years of practice. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched differently than the other girls. When Madison, the team captain, demonstrated the moves, her eyes seemed to skip right over Keisha. When they broke into smaller groups to practice, Keisha found herself working alone more often than not. After the official tryout ended, Keisha was packing up her water bottle when she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "She's actually not bad," one of the girls was saying. "Yeah, but can you imagine her in the uniform?" another voice replied. "Those outfits are not made for girls like her." Maybe if she lost some weight first. I don't think that's really the Lincoln High look, you know. Keisha felt like someone had punched her in the stomach. She finished packing her bag with shaking hands and walked out of the gym with her head held high. But inside, she was crumbling. The dance team results were posted 3 days later. Keisha's name wasn't on the list. She stared at that paper for a long time, reading every name twice to make sure she hadn't missed hers somehow. Girls who had stumbled through the routine made the team. Girls who couldn't keep the beat made the team, but not her. That night, she called Destiny, her best friend from Atlanta. "I don't get it," Keisha said, curled up on her bed with her phone pressed to her ear. "I know I was better than at least half those girls." "Did they say why you didn't make it?" Destiny asked. "They don't have to give reasons. They just post the names." "That's messed up, Keisha. You're an amazing dancer. Everyone knows that. Maybe I'm not as good as I thought I was." "Don't you dare." Destiny's voice was fierce. "Don't you dare let them make you doubt yourself. You know who you are." But after they hung up, Keisha wasn't so sure anymore. The comments got more frequent after that. Maybe because she was paying more attention, or maybe because some people felt bolder now. In the hallway between classes, she heard someone say, "She's pretty, but she'd be so much prettier if she just lost like 30 pounds. In the bathroom, while she was in a stall, 2 girls were talking by the sinks. "I heard she tried out for dance team, can you imagine? Like, know your limits, right?" Each comment was like a tiny cut, and they were starting to add up. Keisha found herself looking in mirrors differently now. Instead of seeing the girl who could make people laugh, who wrote stories that made her English teacher cry, who could solve math problems that stumped half the class, she started seeing only the things that made her different. The curves that didn't match the slim figures she saw in magazines. The skin color that made her stand out in most of her classes. The hair that required different products and different care than what most of her classmates understood. She started eating lunch in the library every day, telling herself it was because she wanted to get ahead on her homework. Really, it was because the cafeteria had started to feel like a battlefield, and she was tired of fighting. Her grades stayed good, great even. Teachers loved her insights in class discussions, and she'd already been asked to tutor 2 struggling students in algebra. But the confidence that had always been her superpower was fading a little more each day. Her mom noticed, of course. Parents always notice when their kids start dimming their own light. "You seem different lately," her mom said one evening as they were doing dishes together. "Quieter." "I'm fine," Keisha said automatically. "Baby, I know you, and you're not fine. Talk to me." Keisha wanted to tell her everything, about the comments and the looks and the way she was starting to feel invisible and too visible at the same time. But she also didn't want to worry her mom, who was dealing with her own adjustments to a new job in a new city. "It's just different here," she said finally. "I'm still figuring it out." Her mom studied her face for a long moment. "You know, when I first started working at the hospital, I felt like I had to prove myself every single day. Like I had to be twice as good to be seen as equal. But then I realized something important." "What?" "I was already enough. I'd always been enough. The problem wasn't with me." Keisha nodded, but she wasn't sure she believed it applied to her situation. Her mom was an adult, a professional. High school felt like a different world with different rules. October arrived with a crispness in the air that reminded Keisha of fall back home. The leaves were starting to change, and there was talk of homecoming and Halloween and all the traditions that made autumn special. But Keisha found herself dreading each day a little more. The comments hadn't stopped. If anything, they seemed to be getting more pointed, more deliberate. She'd started taking different routes to class to avoid certain groups of students. She'd stopped raising her hand as much, not wanting to draw attention to herself. She'd even started dressing differently, choosing clothes that made her blend in rather than express who she was. The girl who had walked into Lincoln High with her head held high was slowly disappearing, replaced by someone who just wanted to survive each day without being noticed. But life has a way of forcing us to face the things we're trying to avoid. And for Keisha, that reckoning was coming sooner than she thought. It would happen on a Tuesday in October during lunch period, when she would be forced to choose between staying invisible and standing up for who she really was. The choice she made would change everything. Tuesday started like any other day. Keisha woke up to her alarm at 6:30, brushed her teeth and chose her outfit carefully. A simple sweater and jeans that wouldn't draw attention. She'd gotten good at being invisible over the past month. Her mom was already gone for her early shift at the hospital, but she'd left a note on the kitchen counter like she did every morning. "Have a beautiful day, beautiful girl. Love you." Keisha folded the note and put it in her backpack, a small reminder that at least one person in the world saw her the way she used to see herself. The morning classes passed without incident. Keisha took notes in history, solved equations in algebra, and participated just enough in English class to avoid drawing attention, but not enough to stand out. She'd perfected this balance over the weeks, becoming a master of flying under the radar. But lunch period was different. For the past 2 weeks, she'd been eating in the library, finding peace among the books and quiet conversations. But today, Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, had put up a sign saying the library was closed during lunch for computer maintenance. Keisha stood in the hallway outside the locked library doors, holding her lunch bag and feeling exposed. She could hear the noise from the cafeteria down the hall, laughter, conversations, the clatter of trays and chairs. It sounded overwhelming. She considered eating in an empty classroom, but most teachers locked their doors during lunch. The bathroom was an option, but the thought of eating her sandwich while sitting on a toilet made her stomach turn. Finally, she took a deep breath and walked toward the cafeteria. The room was packed, as usual. Every table seemed full of groups, who belonged together, who had history and inside jokes and the kind of easy friendship that Keisha missed desperately. She scanned the room, looking for an empty spot or maybe a table where she could sit at the edge without bothering anyone. That's when she saw them. Chelsea Morrison and her group had claimed their usual table near the center of the cafeteria. Chelsea was one of those girls who seemed to have everything. Perfect hair, perfect clothes, perfect grades, and the kind of confidence that came from never having to question whether she belonged somewhere. Her boyfriend Ryan was sitting next to her, along with 3 other students who made up what everyone called the popular table. They were laughing about something, their voices carrying over the general cafeteria noise. Keisha tried to walk past them quickly, hoping to find a seat at one of the tables near the back. But as she passed their table, carrying her lunch bag, and trying to be invisible, Chelsea's voice cut through the air. "Oh my God, look who finally decided to show her face in here." Keisha froze. She wasn't sure if Chelsea was talking about her, but the sudden quiet that fell over the nearby table suggested that she was. "I'm talking to you," Chelsea said, louder this time. "New girl." Keisha turned around slowly, her heart pounding. "Were you saying something to me?" Chelsea smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that meant trouble. "I was just wondering where you've been eating lunch. We never see you in here anymore." "The library," Keisha said quietly, hoping this conversation would end quickly. "Oh, the library," Ryan said like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "That makes sense." "What's that supposed to mean?" Keisha asked, even though part of her didn't want to know the answer. Chelsea looked at her friends, then back at Keisha. "Well, let's just say you probably shouldn't be eating lunch anywhere. Maybe skip a few meals, you know?" The words hit Keisha like a physical blow. She felt her cheeks burn with shame and anger, but she couldn't seem to move or speak. "I mean, no offense," Chelsea continued, her voice getting louder. "But maybe hit the gym instead of the cafeteria. Just a suggestion." More tables were starting to pay attention now. Keisha could feel eyes on her from all directions, and she wanted nothing more than to disappear completely. Ryan laughed and added, "Yeah, maybe try a salad instead of whatever's in that bag." "Guys, come on," one of the other students at their table said quietly, but Chelsea waved him off. "What?" "I'm just being honest, someone should tell her." Keisha stood there, frozen, as the cafeteria around her seemed to hold its breath. Some students were staring openly now. Others were pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. A few were even holding up their phones, and Keisha realized with horror that they might be recording this. Chelsea stood up from her chair, and suddenly she seemed much taller and more intimidating. "Look, I'm not trying to be mean, But this is Lincoln High. We have standards here. And maybe you'd fit in better if you, tried a little harder to fit in. What's that supposed to mean? Keisha's voice was barely a whisper. It means maybe lose some weight. Maybe dress better. Maybe realize that not everyone is going to accept you just because you show up. The cafeteria was almost completely quiet now. Even the lunch staff seemed to have stopped what they were doing to watch this unfold. Keisha felt tears starting to burn behind her eyes. And she knew that if she started crying in front of all these people, she would never recover from the humiliation. She looked around the room, seeing faces that ranged from uncomfortable to entertained to completely indifferent. For a moment, she considered just walking away, leaving the cafeteria, maybe leaving the school entirely, going home and begging her mom to move back to Atlanta where people knew her, where she didn't have to prove her worth every single day. But then something shifted inside her. Maybe it was thinking about her mom's note that morning calling her beautiful. Maybe it was remembering Destiny's voice on the phone, telling her not to let anyone make her doubt herself. Maybe it was thinking about all the comments and looks and small cruelties she'd endured over the past month, letting them chip away at her confidence piece by piece. Or maybe it was just that she was tired of shrinking herself to fit into spaces that were never meant for her. Tired of apologizing for taking up space in the world. Tired of letting other people decide what she was worth. Keisha took a deep breath and looked directly at Chelsea. When she spoke, her voice was steady and clear, carrying across the silent cafeteria. "You're right," she said. Chelsea looked surprised, like she hadn't expected Keisha to agree with her. "I am fat," Keisha continued, "and I am black, and I'm probably not going to fit into your idea of what belongs at Lincoln High." The cafeteria was so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. "But here's what you don't understand," Keisha said, her voice getting stronger with each word. "I'm also smart. I'm kind. I'm funny. I can write stories that make people cry and solve math problems that half this room can't figure out. I can dance better than anyone on your precious dance team, and I have more integrity in my little finger than you have in your whole body." Chelsea's face was starting to turn red, but Keisha wasn't finished. "You think you're better than me because you're skinny and popular and everyone's afraid to disagree with you. But you know what you really are? You're small. Not in your body. In your heart, in your mind, in your soul. And that's something no amount of popularity can fix." Keisha looked around the cafeteria, making eye contact with students who had been watching this whole scene unfold. "I've been trying to make myself smaller for weeks, thinking that would help me fit in here. But I'm done with that. I'm done apologizing for being exactly who I am. If you don't like it, that's your problem, not mine." She picked up her lunch bag from where she'd set it down and walked to an empty table near the window. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she sat down calmly and opened her sandwich. The cafeteria stayed quiet for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, conversations started to resume, but the energy in the room had changed completely. Keisha ate her lunch in peace, watching the world continue outside the window. She felt different somehow. Lighter, despite what Chelsea had said about her weight. Stronger, despite feeling vulnerable and exposed. She had no idea that someone had recorded her response. She had no idea that by the end of the day, that recording would be shared hundreds of times. She had no idea that her moment of standing up for herself would inspire thousands of other kids who felt like outsiders in their own schools. All she knew was that for the first time in weeks, she felt like herself again, and that was enough. Keisha finished her lunch in the quiet corner of the cafeteria, trying to process what had just happened. Her heart was still racing, but there was something else too, a feeling she hadn't experienced in weeks. Relief, like she'd been holding her breath for a month and could finally exhale. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period, and students began filing out of the cafeteria. A few kids looked her way as they passed, but their expressions were different now. Less dismissive, more curious. A girl she didn't recognize gave her a small smile and nod. As Keisha gathered her things, Tyler from her biology class approached her table. "Hey," he said quietly. That was pretty amazing what you did back there. Keisha looked up at him, surprised. Thanks, I guess. No, seriously. Chelsea's been treating people like garbage since middle school. Someone needed to call her out. I didn't really plan it, Keisha admitted. It just happened. Sometimes the best moments are the ones we don't plan, Tyler said. See you in bio. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Keisha tried to focus on her classes, but she kept replaying the cafeteria scene in her mind. Had she really said those things? Had she really stood up to the most popular girl in school in front of everyone? In biology class, Tyler's lab partner had switched seats to sit next to him, leaving the spot next to Keisha empty. A girl named Zoe slipped into the chair instead. Mind if I sit here today? Zoe asked. Sure, Keisha said, grateful for the company. As they worked on their lab assignment, Zoe said quietly, What you said at lunch today, that took guts. It probably made everything worse, Keisha replied, adjusting the microscope. Maybe. Or maybe it made things better for a lot of people who were too scared to speak up. Keisha looked at her curiously. What do you mean? Zoe was quiet for a moment, then said, I've been dealing with some stuff too. Different stuff, but sometimes it feels like high school is just about surviving until you can get out, you know? What you did today made me think maybe it doesn't have to be that way. After school, Keisha was walking to the front entrance to meet her mom when she heard someone call her name. She turned to see a girl she recognized from her English class jogging to catch up with her. Keisha, wait up. The girl was out of breath. When she reached her, I'm Hannah. We're in Mrs. Rodriguez's class together. Oh yeah, hi. I just wanted to say thank you for what you did today. Chelsea made my life miserable freshman year, and I never had the courage to stand up to her like that. I don't know if it was courage or just finally reaching my breaking point, Keisha said honestly. Either way, it mattered. Trust me. When Keisha got home that evening, she found her mom already in the kitchen starting dinner. Her mom took one look at her and immediately knew something was different. Okay, what happened today? Her mom asked, setting down her wooden spoon. And don't say nothing because you've got that look. What look? The look you used to get when you were little and you'd done something you thought might get you in trouble, but you were also proud of. Keisha couldn't help but smile. Her mom really did know her better than anyone. She told her mom everything, about the cafeteria, about Chelsea's comments, about her response, about the conversations afterward. Her mom listened without interrupting, her expression shifting, from concern to pride to something that looked like relief. I'm proud of you, her mom said when Keisha finished. But I'm also sorry you had to go through that. I think I needed to go through it, Keisha said. I'd been letting them make me smaller and smaller until I almost forgot who I was. And who are you? I'm Keisha Williams. I'm smart and funny and kind. And yes, I'm fat and black, and sometimes that makes people uncomfortable. But that's their problem, not mine. Her mom hugged her tight. There's my girl. I was wondering where she'd gone. The next morning, Keisha woke up to dozens of notifications on her phone, text messages from numbers she didn't recognize, friend requests on social media, and mentions in posts she hadn't seen. She clicked on one of the links and felt her stomach drop. Someone had recorded her confrontation with Chelsea and posted it online. The video had been shared hundreds of times overnight with comments ranging from supportive to cruel to everything in between. Oh no, she whispered, scrolling through the responses. But as she read more, she realized something surprising. Most of the comments were positive. Really positive. This girl is my hero. I wish I had her confidence. Someone finally said what we were all thinking about bullies like that. She handled that with so much grace. Why can't I be this brave? There were negative comments too, of course. People calling her names, making jokes about her appearance, defending Chelsea. But they were outnumbered by messages of support from strangers who saw themselves in her story. When Keisha arrived at school that morning, she noticed the difference immediately. Students were looking at her, but not the way they had been for the past month. Some were staring out of curiosity, others with something that looked like respect. In her first class, 3 different students came up to her before the bell rang. I saw the video, one said. You're awesome. My sister shared that on her Instagram, said another. She's a junior in college and said you reminded her why she started standing up to bullies. The third student, a quiet boy she'd never spoken to before, simply said, "Thank you." By lunchtime, Keisha had heard from the school counselor, 2 teachers, and the principal. Not to get in trouble, to offer support and ask if she was okay. The principal, Mrs. Davis, had called her into the office during study hall. "I heard about what happened yesterday," Mrs. Davis said. "Are you all right?" "I think so," Keisha said. "Am I in trouble?" "No, absolutely not. But I want you to know that we take bullying seriously here and we're looking into the situation. I don't want Chelsea to get in trouble because of me." Mrs. Davis looked surprised. "That's very mature of you. But actions have consequences, and what happened yesterday wasn't okay. I just want it to be over." "I understand. But I also want you to know that what you did took tremendous courage. We have a lot of students who could learn from your example." When lunch period arrived, Keisha hesitated outside the cafeteria doors. Part of her wanted to find somewhere else to eat, to avoid any potential drama, but she thought about what she'd said the day before about not apologizing for taking up space. She walked into the cafeteria with her head held high. The change was immediate and obvious. Chelsea's table was smaller today. Several of her usual crowd had found other places to sit. Chelsea herself looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with most of the room. But more importantly, as Keisha looked for a place to sit, she heard a voice call out, "Keisha, over here!" It was Hannah from her English class, sitting with 3 other students at a table near the window. They were waving her over with genuine smiles. As she walked toward them, other students nodded at her, said, "Hello," made room for her to pass. It felt like walking through a completely different school than the one she'd been navigating for the past month. "How are you feeling?" Zoe asked as Keisha sat down. "This must be overwhelming." "A little," Keisha admitted. "I didn't expect any of this." "You probably don't realize it yet," said a boy named Alex. "But you changed things here yesterday. Not just for you, but for a lot of people." "How do you mean?" Hannah leaned forward. "Chelsea's been the queen bee here for 3 years. Everyone was afraid of her, so no one ever challenged her. You showed everyone that she's just a person, and not a very nice one. Plus," Zoe added, "you showed the rest of us that we don't have to accept being treated badly just because someone's popular." As if to prove their point, a girl from the table next to them leaned over. "Excuse me, are you the girl from the video?" Keisha nodded, bracing herself. "I just wanted to say thank you. I've been dealing with bullies since elementary school, and watching you stand up for yourself made me realize I can do it too." "You can," Keisha said. "It's scary, but you can." The girl smiled and went back to her lunch, but the interaction left Keisha feeling something she hadn't expected. Responsible. Not in a bad way, but in a way that mattered. Her moment of standing up for herself had somehow become bigger than just her own experience. Over the next few days, the messages kept coming. Students from other schools who had seen the video, adults sharing their own stories of being bullied, parents thanking her for showing their kids that it was okay to stand up for themselves. A local news station even reached out, wanting to do a story about bullying and her response to it. Keisha wasn't sure she wanted that kind of attention, but her mom helped her think it through. "The choice is yours," her mom said, "but you have an opportunity to help other kids who are going through what you went through. I never wanted to be famous for being bullied. You're not famous for being bullied. You're being recognized for how you handled being bullied. There's a big difference." The interview aired on a Friday evening, and by Saturday morning, Keisha's video had been shared thousands more times. She was getting messages from kids all over the country, sharing their own stories and thanking her for her courage. It was overwhelming and amazing and terrifying all at the same time. But most importantly, when she walked into Lincoln High the following Monday, she walked in as herself. Completely unapologetically herself. And for the first time since moving to this new town, that felt like exactly the right person to be. 6 months had passed since that October day in the cafeteria, and Keisha barely recognized the school she now walked through each morning. Not because the building had changed, but because everything else had. The most obvious change was in herself. The girl who had spent those first weeks trying to become invisible now moved through the hallways. With quiet confidence, she wore clothes that she liked, laughed loudly when something was funny, and raised her hand in class without worrying about drawing attention. But the changes went far beyond just her own experience. Lincoln High had implemented what they called the Respect Initiative, a comprehensive program addressing bullying, inclusion, and creating what Principal Davis called a culture of kindness. It included peer mediation training, anonymous reporting systems, and regular assemblies about treating others with dignity. Keisha had been asked to speak at the first assembly, sharing her story with the entire school. Standing on that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces including Chelsea's, she had felt nervous but determined. "I'm not here to shame anyone," she had said into the microphone. "We've all said things we regret, done things we wish we could take back, but we can choose to do better going forward." The response had been overwhelmingly positive. Teachers reported that students were being kinder to each other in classes. The guidance counselors said more kids were seeking help when they needed it instead of suffering in silence. But perhaps the most meaningful change for Keisha was personal. She had found her people. Her lunch table now included Hannah, Zoe, Alex, Tyler, and several other students who had discovered they shared more than just the experience of feeling like outsiders. They had become a real friend group, the kind that met up on weekends, texted constantly, and had each other's backs no matter what. "Remember when you used to eat lunch in the library?" Hannah said one day as they sat together, laughing about something Alex had said. "I remember when I thought I'd never fit in anywhere here," Keisha replied. "You didn't need to fit in," Zoe said. "You needed to find the right people to be yourself with." The journalism program had also become a huge part of Keisha's life. Mrs. Chen had encouraged her to write about her experience, and the article had been picked up by several national publications focused on youth issues. More importantly, it had inspired Keisha to start a blog called Taking Up Space, where she wrote about body positivity, standing up to bullying, and the experience of being a black teen in predominantly white spaces. The blog had gained a following of thousands of readers, many of them teens dealing with similar challenges. Keisha received emails daily from kids sharing their own stories, asking for advice or simply thanking her for making them feel less alone. One message that had particularly touched her came from a girl in California. "I was about to transfer schools because the bullying was so bad. Then I saw your video and read your blog. You showed me that the problem wasn't with me, it was with them. I decided to stay and fight for my right to be here. Thank you for giving me courage I didn't know I had." The speaking engagements had continued too. Keisha had been invited to address middle schools and high schools across the state, sharing her story and facilitating discussions about bullying, self-worth, and creating inclusive communities. At first, the attention had been overwhelming. She was just a teenager who had stood up for herself, not someone who had set out to become a public speaker or activist. But her mom had helped her see it differently. "You have a gift," her mom had said one evening as they looked through the latest batch of letters from kids who had been inspired by Keisha's story. "You have the ability to help people feel less alone. That's not something to take lightly. Just want to be a normal teenager," Keisha had said. "You are a normal teenager. You're just a normal teenager who did something extraordinary, and now you get to decide what to do with that." What she had decided to do was use her platform carefully and thoughtfully. She partnered with anti-bullying organizations, worked with schools to develop better policies, and continued writing and speaking about issues that mattered to her, but she also made sure to stay grounded in her regular life. She still struggled with algebra sometimes. She still had days when she felt insecure or uncertain. She still dealt with people who made ignorant comments or treated her differently because of her race or size. The difference was that now she had the tools and support system to handle those challenges without losing herself in the process. Chelsea had ended up transferring to a private school across town after winter break. Keisha had heard through the hallway gossip network that Chelsea's parents had decided she needed a fresh start. Whether that was the real reason or whether there had been consequences at home for her behavior, Keisha didn't know. What she did know was that she felt sorry for Chelsea rather than angry. She had come to understand that people who treated others cruelly were usually dealing with their own pain and insecurity. That didn't excuse the behavior, but it helped Keisha let go of any resentment she had been carrying. Do you ever wonder, what would have happened if you hadn't stood up to her that day? Hannah asked during one of their lunch conversations. Keisha considered the question seriously. I think I would have kept getting smaller and smaller until I forgot who I was completely. And I think she would have kept treating people badly, because no one ever showed her that actions have consequences. Do you think she learned anything from it? I hope so. I hope she's happier wherever she is now. Spring brought new opportunities and challenges. Keisha had been accepted to a summer program for young writers at a prestigious university, where she would spend 6 weeks working on a book project about her experiences and the broader issues of bullying and self-acceptance. She had also been invited to speak at a national conference on youth empowerment, sharing the stage with activists, authors, and leaders who had been fighting for change far longer than she had. Sometimes I can't believe this is my life, she told her mom one evening as they were preparing dinner together. What do you mean? A year ago, I was just a regular kid who liked to write stories and hang out with her friends. Now I'm speaking at conferences and getting letters from kids all over the country. You're still that regular kid, her mom said. You just discovered that regular kids can do extraordinary things when they find their voice and use it. Do you think I'm making a real difference? Her mom showed her the latest stack of letters that had arrived that week. What do you think? As Keisha read through the messages, from kids who had found the courage to report bullying, from parents whose children had been inspired to be kinder, from teachers who had used her story to start important conversations in their classrooms, she felt the weight of responsibility that had become familiar over the past months. But it wasn't a burden. It was a privilege. The school year was winding down, and as Keisha looked ahead to her junior year, she felt excited rather than anxious. She had plans to expand her blog, work on her book project over the summer, and continue speaking to young people about finding their voices. More importantly, she had learned something that would serve her for the rest of her life: the difference between fitting in and belonging. Fitting in meant changing yourself to match what others expected. Belonging meant finding places and people where you could be authentically yourself. At Lincoln High, she had finally found where she belonged, not because the school had changed to accommodate her, but because she had refused to change to accommodate others' narrow expectations. On the last day of school, as she cleaned out her locker and said goodbye to friends who were heading off for summer adventures, Keisha reflected on how different this day felt compared to her first day at Lincoln. She was still the girl who loved to write, who could solve complex math problems, who could dance to any beat. She was still fat and black and proud of both. She was still someone who believed in kindness and integrity and standing up for what was right. But now she was also someone who knew her own power. Someone who understood that her voice mattered, and that using it could create ripples of change that reached far beyond what she had ever imagined. As she walked out of Lincoln High for the last time that school year, Keisha smiled, thinking about the girl who had been so nervous about fitting in on her first day. If she could go back and tell that girl anything, it would be this: don't try to fit in. The world needs exactly who you are. That October day in the cafeteria had lasted maybe 5 minutes, but its impact would last a lifetime, not just for Keisha, but for all the kids who would find their own courage by watching hers. And that, she had learned, was how change really happened. One voice at a time, one brave moment at a time, one person deciding they were worthy of respect and refusing to accept anything less. The ripples were still spreading, and they would continue long after Keisha graduated and moved on to whatever came next. Because courage, once demonstrated, has a way of inspiring more courage. And the world, Keisha had discovered, was always hungry for more brave voices willing to speak truth and stand up for what was right.